The debris field used to be 200 ships. Yara counted what was left. 31. She did it the way she did everything. Quietly, without expression, the number settling into her chest like a stone dropping into still water. 31 ships. 14,000 crew. Against 4,000 Vreth vessels arranged in a crescent so wide it blocked the sun from the side of Earth they were fighting over. She did not say the number out loud. There was no point saying it out loud. The bridge of the adamant smelled like burnt wiring and recycled air, and the particular sour sweat that human beings produce when they have been frightened for too long. Her crew had been frightened for 11 days. They were past the shaking stage. They were in the quiet stage, which was worse. The quiet stage meant they had accepted something. Yara had not accepted it. She stood at the forward viewport and looked at the Vreth fleet, the way a person looks at a storm rolling in over flat land. Not with fear, exactly. With a kind of cold attention. You watch a storm like that because watching is the only thing left to do. You have already tied down everything you can tie down. Commander, Deo's voice from the comm station behind her. Long-range pickets are reporting movement on the Vreth eastern flank. How much movement? They're rotating artillery platforms, repositioning for a new firing arc. She turned. Her brother was 26 years old and looked 19, and she had spent 11 days trying not to look at him too long. He had their mother's eyes and their father's habit of bouncing his knee when he was scared, and his knee was bouncing right now even though he was sitting very still otherwise. Arc toward what? She said. London, Cape Town, and, he checked, the Johannesburg Shelter Network. She absorbed this. The Vreth did not bomb randomly. They were methodical. They had been doing this for 300 years, clearing planets the way a groundskeeper clears weeds. Pull, move, pull, move. They were rotating their artillery because they had already calculated the outcome of this battle, and they were arranging themselves for the next phase, the planetary bombardment phase. They had not even finished with her fleet yet, and they were already planning the next part. She said, "Get me a firing solution on those platforms. Commander, the range." "I know the range, Deo. Get me the solution anyway." He got her the solution. It was bad. Everything was bad. The Adamant was a heavy cruiser. Had been, once. Now it had 3 functioning gun batteries, a port engine running at 60%, and a hull patch on Deck 7 that the engineering team had fixed with materials Yara had decided not to ask about. She had a destroyer escort, 2 frigates, and the scattered remnants of 4 other task groups, all damaged, all low on munitions, all crewed by people in the quiet stage. 31 ships. She had started with 200. The first day they had fought like they were going to win. That was the thing about human beings. They came in fighting like they were going to win, even when the numbers said otherwise, even when every rational calculation pointed toward a different conclusion. She had watched her captains throw their ships at the Vreth fleet, with an aggression that was almost offensive in its optimism. They had taken out 60 Vreth vessels on day 1. 60. She had felt something complicated rise in her chest when the count came in. Not quite hope, because she was not built for hope the way some people were, but something adjacent to it, a kind of fierce arithmetic. 60 down, 3,940 to go. The math reasserted itself by day 3. They lost the Kenyatta first. Heavy cruiser, crew of 400. A Vreth lance battery caught it at the wrong angle, and it came apart slowly, the way big ships do, like a building settling. She watched it go, said nothing, filed it. Then the Sao Paulo, the Resolute, the Incheon, the Cape of Good Hope, which was ironic in a way that nobody on the bridge laughed at. They didn't laugh at a lot of things by day 3. By day 7 she had 80 ships. By day 9, 50. By day 11, 31. She had the names of every lost ship in a file she kept open on a secondary screen. She did not look at it constantly. She looked at it enough. There was a difference between grief and performance of grief, and she had no patience for the performance. The grief was in the numbers. The numbers were enough. Commander. A different voice. Lieutenant Farouk at Tactical. The Galactic Council is transmitting. Yara turned from the viewport. Put it on screen. The Council's representative materialized on the main display. He was Pelhari, tall, gray-skinned, with the 4 eyes that always made human diplomats slightly uncomfortable. He was very composed. He had the composure of someone delivering a prepared statement. Commander Osei. His translator rendered his voice flat and careful. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we are transmitting formal recognition of humanity's defense of the Sol system. Your resistance has been noted in the official record. She waited. The Council has determined that further military intervention on behalf of Earth would not be strategically viable at this time. We express our condolences." He paused. "The record will show that humanity fought with—" She cut the transmission. The bridge was very quiet for a moment. "Commander," Ferrick said. "Find me a firing solution on those artillery platforms," she said. "Better than the last one." He found her a better one. It was still bad. She approved it anyway. She thought about the council transmission while Farouk ran targeting calculations. Noted in the official record. That was what 300 years of Vreth expansion had produced. A galaxy full of civilizations that watched, noted things in official records, and expressed condolences. They were not cowards exactly. It was more clinical than cowardice. They had simply done the math. The Vreth were strong. Challenging the Vreth was costly. The cost was not worth it. The cost was never worth it until it was your planet in the crosshairs. Then the math looked different. Then you noticed that the math had always been different and you had been reading it wrong. Yara had been doing the math since she was 12 years old, sitting on her grandmother's porch in Accra watching news feeds of the Vreth absorbing the Kalthari system. She had not known then that she would end up here, in this chair, commanding the last of something. She had only known that the math the council kept presenting, the survival math, the intervention not viable math, was a math that only worked if you didn't count the right things. The council counted ships, casualties, resources. They did not count what it cost to be the kind of civilization that watched. She had never been able to make herself into that kind of civilization. She had tried, once, after Mars. She had sat in a room for a week after Mars and tried to calculate herself into something more rational, less willing to spend lives on gestures. She had failed. The failure did not feel like weakness. It felt like a fact about herself, the same way her height was a fact. It was simply what she was made of. She was made of the other kind of math. "Commander," Dio again. His voice had a different quality to it, something she recognized. Not fear, which she was used to. Something closer to confusion. "I'm getting a reading on long-range sensors." "Vreth reinforcement?" The word tasted like acid, reinforcement, as if 4,000 ships required reinforcing. "I don't know." He was quiet for a second. She heard him running the scan again. "It's not a Vreth signature. It's not any signature I have on file." She walked to his station, looked at his screen. There was a mass on the edge of the system, past the Oort cloud, moving inward, moving at a speed that her sensors were having trouble computing correctly because the number it kept returning did not match anything in her database of known drive technologies. "Size?" she said. "Hard to get a clear reading. The mass return is—" He trailed off, ran it again. "Large, Commander. Very large. Can you get a visual?" "Not yet. Too far. The drive signature is— It's not anything I know." She straightened up, looked at the Vreth fleet, looked at the unknown contact, looked at her 31 ships. She added the unknown to her calculations. A new fleet showing up in the middle of this battle was not, statistically, going to be a friendly fleet. The galaxy had made its position on that reasonably clear. It was going to be something that made the situation worse. It was going to be Vreth allies, or scavengers, or something else that had decided this was a good moment to press an advantage, while humanity was occupied with being exterminated. She decided it did not matter. Whatever was coming, it was coming. She could not stop it. She could only keep fighting the thing in front of her, and let the next problem arrive when it arrived. "Keep monitoring it," she said. "Give me updates every 3 minutes." "Yes, Commander." She went back to the viewport. Below her, Earth turned. The night side was lit in places it shouldn't have been. Cities that had taken hits in the early orbital bombardments, still burning. The day side was clean and blue and achingly familiar. She could see the West African coastline from here, the shape of it unchanged, the same shape it had been since long before human beings had looked up at the stars and started wondering about neighbors. It was a beautiful planet. She had always known it was a beautiful planet, but she felt it more acutely now, the way you feel the weight of a thing when you are about to set it down. She was not going to set it down. "Farouk," she said, "time to their artillery platforms being in optimal firing position?" 40 minutes, Commander." "And our firing solution?" "Ready on your mark." She nodded. 40 minutes. She could work with 40 minutes. She had worked with less. Behind her, she heard Deo pull in a breath. Not quite a sound. Yushed, the shape of one. "Commander," he said, "the contact just increased speed." She did not turn around. "How fast?" she said. He told her the number. She turned around. The number on his screen did not belong to any drive system she had ever encountered. It did not belong to any drive system in the Galactic Council's combined database, which she knew, because she had spent 3 nights before this battle reading everything there was to read about every known spacefaring civilization's propulsion technology, looking for an edge, looking for anything. The number on Deo's screen was not in any of those files. The contact was coming in fast, coming in direct. No evasive pattern, no approach angle designed to look non-threatening, just a straight line. The kind of line something draws when it knows where it is going and sees no reason to pretend otherwise. "Any signal?" she said. "Any hail? Any ID transmission?" Dio checked. His knee was not bouncing anymore. He had gone very still. "Nothing," he said. "Commander, it's not transmitting anything. No ID, no hail, no beacon. It's just..." He looked up at her. "It's just coming." She turned back to the viewport. 31 ships against 4,000. And something else, coming fast from the dark edge of the solar system, with no name, and no signal, and no explanation. She filed it with everything else. She would know what it was when it got here. Until then, she had artillery platforms to deal with and 40 minutes to do it in. She opened ship-wide comms. "All hands," she said. Her voice was even. It was always even. "We are initiating strike on Vreth artillery platforms on my mark. Helm will give you the approach vector in 60 seconds. I want everyone at their station, and I want clean execution." She paused. "This is not the last thing we do today, so do it well, and come back to your stations, and we will do the next thing after that." She closed comms. She did not add anything else. She did not make a speech. The people on her ship were past the point where speeches helped. They were in the quiet stage, and people in the quiet stage needed clear instruction and clean purpose, not words. She gave them the mark. 31 ships moved. At the edge of the solar system, the contact came in faster still, and the sensors still could not name it, and the darkness it moved through gave nothing away. The Resolute Dawn died at 0340 hours. It was a frigate, crew of 90. It had been running escort on the Adamant's port side for 11 days, and its captain was a woman named Hessa Mirali, who had 3 children on the ground in Tehran, and who had, on day 4 of the siege, repaired her ship's targeting system with components stripped from her own quarters, because there were no spare parts left, and she was not going to stop fighting over a targeting system. The Vreth Lance battery that hit her found the hull patch on her port bow, the one that had been holding since day 2. It did not hold this time. 90 people. Yara put the name in the file, kept moving. 30 ships now. The strike on the artillery platforms had worked, partially. They had taken out 6 of the 11 platforms before the Vreth reoriented and forced them back. 6 was not enough to stop the bombardment arc from completing. The Vreth would be in position to hit the Johannesburg shelter network within the hour, but 6 was 6, and every minute the remaining platforms spent repositioning was a minute the shelters had to get people deeper underground. She had bought minutes. That was what the last 11 days had been, buying minutes, each one costing something she could not get back. She stood at the tactical display and watched the Vreth fleet's slow, patient reorganization. They did this, pulled back into formation after every engagement, reordered, recalculated. They were not emotional about it. They had been doing this for 300 years, and they had the calm of something that had never lost. Not complacency, competence. There was a difference, and it mattered, because complacency made mistakes, and the Vreth did not make mistakes. They were going to win. She knew they were going to win. She had known it since day 6. The math had been clear on day 6. She had simply not announced it, because announcing it would not help anything, and what did not help anything, she did not do. What she did instead was keep fighting, and buy minutes, and wait for a variable the math hadn't accounted for. She had not expected a variable. Variables were not something you counted on, but you kept your eyes open anyway, because occasionally, not often, not reliably, not in any pattern you could model, the universe produced something the math had not included. "Commander," Deo's voice, "the contact has entered the inner system." She crossed to his station. The contact was on the display now, clearer, though not entirely clear. The sensors kept sliding off it, in a way that she had no technical language for. It was as if the ship, and it was a ship, she could see that now, a shape that was unmistakably constructed, unmistakably intentional, did not want to be fully seen, and the sensors were respecting that wish without meaning to. What she could see was this. It was large, larger than any single vessel in her remaining fleet, larger, she thought, than anything the Vreth had brought either, though the mass reading kept fluctuating in ways that made clean comparison difficult. It was pale. That was the word that came to her looking at the partial visual on Dio's screen. Not white, pale, the color of old bone or old stone, something that had been exposed to a very long time and had come out the other side of it. It moved without any of the signatures she associated with movement. No drive bloom, no energy wash. It displaced space the way a very heavy object displaces water, not by pushing but by belonging, by having sufficient mass that the universe simply rearranged itself around it. Still no signal? She said. Nothing. Dio shook his head. I've tried every frequency we have. Standard hail protocols, emergency bands, the old contact frequencies from the first contact archives. Nothing. It's not responding. It's not even acknowledging that we're hailing it. Is it receiving? I think so. I can't prove it. But it... He paused, choosing words carefully. It feels like something that is listening and choosing not to answer, not something that can't hear us. She accepted that. It was not a technical assessment. She accepted it anyway. Keep trying, she said. Different intervals, different frequencies. Try the Vreth hail protocols too. He looked up at her. The Vreth protocols, she said again. He tried them. Nothing. The Vreth noticed the contact at 0412 hours. She knew they noticed it because the fleet reorganization stopped. Not gradually, it simply stopped, the way a machine stops when someone cuts the power. One moment the Vreth were moving with their characteristic measured efficiency, and the next moment they were still, all 4,000 ships, still. It lasted 40 seconds. Then the Vreth fleet began to change shape. Yara watched it happen on tactical. The Vreth were pulling ships from their engagement line and moving them to face the contact. Not all ships. They left a significant force oriented toward Earth, toward her fleet, but a substantial reallocation, hundreds of vessels swinging to face the pale shape coming in from the outer dark. She had been fighting the Vreth for 11 days. She had watched them respond to every tactic she had thrown at them with the same cold efficiency, the same unhurried certainty. She had never seen them stop. She had never seen them pull force from an active engagement line to deal with an unknown contact. They knew something she didn't. Or they didn't know something, and that was worse. Farouk, she said, not looking away from the tactical display. What is the Vreth force allocation toward the contact? 412 vessels, Commander. Heavy class. They're pulling their best ships. 412 of their best ships, against one unknown vessel. She did not know what to make of that. She filed it. Commander. A new voice. Ensign Priya at sensors. Young. The youngest person on the bridge. 22. Who had been on her first deployment when the siege started, and who had not complained once, and who Yara privately thought was going to be a very good officer if she survived long enough to become one. I'm getting something on the debris field sensors. What kind of something? The contact. It's moving through the debris field from the Kenyatta group. She hesitated. Commander, it's not changing course. It's not going around the debris. Yara looked at the display. The debris field from the ships lost on day 1 spread across a significant stretch of the battle space, destroyed hulls, scattered equipment, things she did not let herself name specifically anymore. The pale ship was on a direct line through the middle of it. Is it going to impact? She said. That's what I thought. Priya's voice was careful. But the debris it's moving. The debris is moving out of the way. Silence on the bridge. Show me, Yara said. Priya put it on the main screen. The image was partial, sensor rendered rather than visual, but it was clear enough. The pale ship moved through the debris field, and the debris moved. Not violently, not with any visible force or energy discharge. The wreckage simply parted, the way a crowd parts for something very large or very old or very certain of where it is going. The pieces of destroyed human ships drifting aside, making room. Nobody on the bridge said anything. Yara looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she said, 3 minutes to the contact reaching engagement range with the Vreth forward force. I want all stations ready for any scenario. If this thing opens fire on us, we respond. If it opens fire on the Vreth, we hold, unless I say otherwise. If it does something we don't have a category for. She paused. Use your judgment and talk to me. Yes, Commander, the bridge said, not in unison. Staggered, the way real people respond, each voice its own. She heard Dio make a sound under his breath. What? She said, not looking at him. Nothing, he said. Then, it's just, the debris moved for it, Commander. It moved like, he stopped. Like what? Like it knew the debris, like it was being careful of it. She did not respond to that. She stored it in the same place she was storing everything about the pale ship, a place in her mind that she was not yet interpreting, only collecting. Interpretation could come later. If there was a later, The Vreth opened fire first. That surprised her. The Vreth were methodical. They did not fire on unknown contacts without identification. Their doctrine was classification before engagement, and they had the patience for it. They had always had the patience for it. 300 years of planetary clearance was a job for a civilization that did not act on feeling. They fired on the pale ship before it was fully in range. She noted that. Filed it. The weapons hit. She could see that on sensors. The pale ship registered impacts, its outline flickering on the display. It was not immune. It was not some invincible thing that Vreth weapons passed through. It took the hits. Its readings changed in ways that suggested damage. It did not stop. It did not slow. It did not deviate 1 degree from its heading. The Vreth fired again. More ships joining the barrage now. The 400 heavy vessels they had repositioned, all of them concentrating fire on this one contact. The pale ship's sensor return flickered and fluctuated, and showed signs of structural stress, and it kept coming. Through the fire, through the barrage, at the same speed, on the same heading, with the same absolute absence of anything that looked like hesitation. Dio made a sound, not a word, just a sound. "I know," Yara said quietly. The pale ship crossed into the gap between the two fleets, and stopped. Dead center, equidistant between the Vreth forward line and her 30 ships. It simply stopped, the way it had been moving, without drama, without visible deceleration. Present, still. The Vreth stopped firing. Her fleet, by instinct, held fire too. No order from her. They just held. The battle space went quiet in a way it had not been quiet in 11 days. The weapons signatures faded. The drive signatures of ships maneuvering faded. For a span of seconds that she could not have counted, there was nothing but the pale ship sitting in the middle of the space between them, still and vast and old, being looked at by 4,000 Vreth vessels and 30 human ones. Then it moved. Not toward Earth. Not toward her fleet. It turned, slowly, with a gravity that was almost ceremonial, and it oriented itself toward the Vreth. Dio exhaled. She heard it across the bridge. All of them, the collective exhale of 30 bridge crew members who had been holding their breath without knowing it. She did not exhale. She watched the pale ship face the Vreth fleet, and she thought about the debris field moving. She thought about 400 Vreth heavy ships firing on a contact before they had classified it. She thought about 300 years and 17 civilizations, and a galactic council that noted things in official records. She thought about variables. "All stations," she said. "Stand by." Somewhere in the Vreth fleet, Admiral Keth Vor was looking at the same pale shape on his own displays. She would not know until much later what he said in that moment, in his own language to his own crew. She did not need to know. She could read it in what he did next. He ordered a full assault. All 4,000 ships. At once. The battle space lit up, the largest single volley she had seen in 11 days of fighting, all of it directed at one target, and the pale ship sat in the middle of it, and the sensors flickered, and the readings spiked, and she gripped the edge of Deo's station with one hand without meaning to. And then the pale ship fired back. The first 3 Vreth dreadnoughts did not explode. That was the thing she kept coming back to. Later, when she had time to come back to things. When ships die in battle, they explode, or they break apart, or they burn. There is always a process. Physics insists on a process. Energy has to go somewhere. Mass has to go somewhere. The first 3 Vreth dreadnoughts did not explode. They did not burn. They did not break. They stopped. One moment they were there. 3 vessels, each the size of a small city, each carrying enough firepower to crack a moon. And then the pale ship fired and they were not there. No debris, no energy bloom, no process. The space they had occupied was just space again, empty and clean, as if the universe had simply made a quiet administrative correction. The Vreth fleet stopped firing. It lasted 2 seconds. Then they fired again. Everything, all of it, and the pale ship took it and returned fire, and 3 more dreadnoughts were simply subtracted from existence, and Yara stood at the tactical display with her hand still on the edge of Dio's station, and did not breathe for a very long time. "It's working," Priya said from sensors. Her voice had a quality Yara had not heard from her before. Not quite awe, something more fragile than awe. Something that happened to a person when the world turned out to be bigger than they had believed. "Commander, the Vreth are taking losses. Real losses. 6 dreadnoughts in the first exchange. 6 dreadnoughts. Gone." The Vreth had lost 60 vessels over 11 days of fighting against the full weight of Earth's fleet, against 200 ships, 30 human nations worth of weapons technology. 11 days of everything humanity had. 60. The pale ship had subtracted 6 dreadnoughts in 40 seconds. What are our readings on the contact? Yara said. Priya checked. It's taking hits, Commander. The Vreth weapons are working. Partially. I'm reading hull stress. Some kind of internal energy disruption. It's not invulnerable. But it's still fighting. Yes, Commander, it's still fighting. She nodded. Stored that too. The pale ship could be hurt. That mattered. She did not know why it mattered yet. She put it away and watched the battle. The Vreth reorganized in 90 seconds. She had to give them that. Any other fleet in the galaxy would have broken on that first exchange. The sudden absence of 6 dreadnoughts, the incomprehensible nature of the weapon, the contact that their sensors still could not fully read. Any other fleet would have fractured. Individual captains making individual survival decisions. The Vreth did not fracture. They reorganized. They pulled back their heaviest ships and pushed forward their mid-range destroyers in screening formations, trying to create enough bodies between themselves and the pale ship to absorb fire, while their gunners recalibrated targeting. It was smart. It was exactly what a disciplined fleet should do. It bought them 40 seconds. The pale ship fired through the screening formation the way light moves through a window. The destroyers scattered. 3 more dreadnoughts vanished from the tactical display. 9. In 3 minutes. Yara became aware of noise on the bridge. Not chaos. Her crew did not do chaos, but sound. The kind of involuntary sound that escapes people when they are watching something that rewrites the scale of what they thought was possible. Someone behind her said something in a language she didn't speak. Farouk, at tactical, laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a person who had been holding something very heavy for 11 days and had just felt the weight shift. She did not tell him to stop. Commander, Deo. His voice was different, not scared, something she had to locate in her memory before she recognized it. He sounded the way he had sounded as a child when something had delighted him so thoroughly he lost track of his composure. That particular bright edge in his voice that meant he had forgotten to be measured. Commander, the Vreth eastern flank is falling back. They're pulling those 400 ships back from their engagement with the contact. Into what formation? Consolidation. They're consolidating. He paused, ran the reading again. Keth Vor is pulling everything into a central mass. He's regrouping. She looked at the display. The Vreth fleet, 4,000 ships, the fleet that had been systematically dismantling what remained of humanity's defense for 11 days, was pulling inward, contracting, the clean, cold efficiency of their formation bending into something tighter, more defensive. The pale ship was pushing a fleet of 4,000 into a defensive posture. She had never seen the Vreth take a defensive posture. She was not entirely sure she was reading the display correctly. She looked at it for 3 more seconds to be sure. She was reading it correctly. Commander. Deo's voice had changed again, the brightness in it gone, something quieter replacing it. I'm getting a transmission. From the contact. The bridge went still. 11 days. The pale ship had been transmitting nothing for the entire time it had been in the system. Every frequency empty. Every hail unanswered. The silence of it had been one of the most unnerving things about it. More unnerving in some ways than its weapons. The weapons were extraordinary, but a thing that would not speak was a different kind of unsettling. It was speaking now. Put it on, Yara said. The transmission came through the bridge speakers. It was not long. It was not in any language the translation systems required more than 2 seconds to process. It was clear and clean and direct, and when it resolved into words, those words sat in the air of the bridge, like something physical, like something with weight. 7 words. We remember what they did to you. Nobody spoke. The bridge was full of people who were very good at their jobs, and who had been performing those jobs under extreme conditions for 11 days without breaking, and none of them spoke. The transmission ended. The speakers carried the absence of it. The silence after was not like regular silence. It had texture. Yara became aware that she was gripping the edge of Dio's station hard enough that her fingers had gone pale at the knuckles. She let go. Replay it, she said. Her voice came out the same as always. She was grateful for that. Dio played it again. We remember what they did to you. The translator had not made an error. She had wondered for a moment if it had made an error. Languages were strange things and translation systems were imperfect, and sometimes a phrase came through with the wrong weight attached. She had wanted it to be an error. It was not an error. Who is it addressed to? Her voice still even. Can you get a directional on the transmission? Dio was quiet for a moment. She heard him running the analysis. She heard him run it again. When he spoke, his voice had that quality of a person who is trying to report a fact that their whole body is resisting. It's a general broadcast, Commander. Omnidirectional. He paused. It's not addressed to the Vreth. It's not addressed to any specific vessel. Another pause, smaller. It's addressed to... His voice stopped. Started again. It's addressed to all of us. To the fleet. Commander, the transmission is addressed to the human fleet. She looked at the pale ship on the tactical display. It was still fighting. It had not stopped fighting during the transmission. It had delivered those 7 words while simultaneously removing Vreth dreadnoughts from the tactical map, casually, the way a person might carry on a conversation while doing something routine with their hands. We remember, not I. We. She filed that. What they did to you, not vague, not general, specific. What they did. Someone had observed specific events and kept them, had held them across however long it had been since anyone had thought to hold them. Deo, she said. Yeah. Not yes, Commander, just yeah, in the voice of someone who was not capable of formality at this particular moment. How old is that ship? He was quiet. She heard him pulling data, cross-referencing the partial readings they had against everything in the database. He was thorough. He always had been. Even as a kid, he had been the one who checked and checked again before he was sure of something, which had driven their mother slightly mad, and which Yara had always privately admired. I can't get a clean reading, he said. The composition data keeps sliding, but the sections I can get clean reads on. He stopped. Commander, the alloy composites I'm reading are not in the database. Not similar to database entries. Not variants of things in the database. They are not in the database at all. Which means? Which means they predate the database. Which means they predate the oldest sample in the database. He pulled up the comparison on his secondary screen, turned it so she could see. The oldest hull material in the Galactic Council's combined database is from the Pelhari First-Era Deep Space Program, 40,000 years old. She looked at the screen. The alloy I'm reading on the contact is older than that, Deo said. By how much, I genuinely cannot tell you. She looked at the pale ship on tactical, still fighting, taking hits, returning fire, removing Vreth vessels from the map with a calm economy that was almost gentle in its certainty. Something that had been alive, active, present, decisive, for longer than human civilization had known how to write things down. Something that had been watching. Remembering. Kethvor's response came 12 minutes after the 7-word transmission. She received it not as a signal, not as anything directed at her fleet, but as an intercept. Her comms team had broken Vreth command frequencies on day 3. A small victory that had been of limited use, since the Vreth apparently communicated mostly in compressed data bursts that took too long to decode to be tactically useful. This one came through clean. Either Kethvor had said it on an unsecured channel, or he had simply not cared whether anyone heard it. It translated as, "Show it no quarter. I will not be recorded as the one who turned from a ghost." She read the intercept twice. A ghost. That was what 300 years of expansion, 17 civilizations, 4,000 warships, and the cold certainty of absolute dominance had produced when it met the pale ship. A word for something that should not exist. Something that had been before, and should be gone, and was not gone. Farak, she said, what's the status on those artillery platforms? He checked, blinked, checked again. The Vreth have pulled them, Commander. They pulled the artillery platforms when they consolidated. The bombardment arc is no longer... He looked up. The bombardment arc is no longer viable. The Johannesburg shelter network. The families inside it, in the dark, underground, counting the hours. They were still there. Good, she said. She turned back to the tactical display. The pale ship was bleeding. She could see it in the sensor readings, the fluctuations growing more pronounced as the engagement continued. The Vreth consolidation had worked, partially. A mass of 4,000 ships all firing together was creating the kind of sustained damage that even this vessel was feeling. It was not stopping, but it was bleeding. She thought about that for a long moment. She thought about 11 days and 30 ships, and the particular math that told you what something was going to cost, and what the bill was still going to come to. She thought about something so old it predated the oldest records in the galaxy coming to a solar system that wasn't its own, in the middle of a war that wasn't its own, and sending 7 words to a fleet that had been losing for 11 days. We remember. Who was we? She did not know. She could not know. The information was not available, and she was not the kind of person who filled the absence of information with comfortable stories. But she knew this. The pale ship had chosen a side. It had crossed whatever distance it had crossed, and taken whatever damage it had decided to take. And it had chosen. In a galaxy full of civilizations that calculated survival math and expressed condolences and noted losses in official records, something had looked at the math differently. Something had done the other kind. "Commander," Dio said. She realized her face had done something. Not much. She was not a person whose face did much, but something. "I'm fine," she said. "I know," he said. "I know you are." A pause. Short. "Commander, the contact is taking sustained damage. Its readings are degrading. If the Vreth maintain this concentration of fire, the structural stress models are showing." "I see them," she said. She did see them. She turned to Farouk. "Get me a firing solution," she said. "On the Vreth consolidated formation, full fleet, everything we have." Farouk stared at her. "Commander, our 30 ships against their consolidated formation is—" "I know the math," she said. "Quiet on the bridge." "Yes, Commander," Farouk said. She looked at the pale ship, old and pale and bleeding and absolutely refusing to stop. Something had come a very long way to do the other kind of math. The least she could do was the same. She had been in battles before. Not like this, nothing like this, but she had been in battles, had felt the particular quality of time that combat produces, the way it compresses some moments and stretches others, until a second can contain everything, and an hour can vanish like smoke. She knew the feeling of a bridge under fire, the smell of it, the sound of her crew working at the absolute edge of what human beings could do under sustained fear. She had never felt the things she felt when 30 ships moved toward 4,000. It was not courage. She had felt courage before, and it had weight to it, a heaviness, the feeling of choosing to carry something difficult. This was not heavy, it was almost light, the lightness of having made a decision so clear that the part of her brain that usually ran parallel calculations, the part that always asked, "But what if? But is there another way? But have you considered?" had simply gone quiet. There was only the thing in front of her, and the course she had set. She supposed that was what the other kind of math felt like when you finally stopped fighting it. "Contact in 40 seconds, Farouk said. "All ships maintain formation," she said into the fleet-wide channel. "Target the consolidated formation's forward screen. We are not trying to break them. We are making them look at us." A pause on the channel. Then Captain Trevino of the San Isidro, her voice rough and dry. "Understood, Commander. Making them look at us." Then the others, one by one. 30 voices confirming, the staggered imperfect chorus of people who understood exactly what they were doing and were doing it anyway. 30 ships against 4,000. She watched the pale ship on tactical while she waited for the range to close. It was still fighting, still removing Vreth vessels from the map with that quiet economy. But the sensor readings were worsening. She could see it clearly now, the structural integrity data degrading in a slope that her eye translated automatically into a timeline. The pale ship was a thing under enormous accumulated stress. The Vreth consolidated formation had figured out what massed fire could do, and they had been doing it, and even something that old and that capable had limits. It was still fighting. It had not stopped for 1 second. She wondered, briefly, in the narrow margin of her attention that the ongoing battle left for wondering, how many times it had done this, whether this was the first time, or whether there had been others. 16 other civilizations had burned before Earth. 16 other fleets had held position in orbit around 16 other beautiful planets and done the math and found the same answer and bought time in the same coin. Had it come then? Had it been there, at the end, when the Kelthari system went dark? When the Soreth Communion sent its final transmission? When whatever civilizations existed before the Galactic Council's records were old enough to be stored had made their last calculations? Or had it come only now? She did not know. She would probably never know. It seemed important not to waste the not knowing on resentment. She filed the question away in the place where she put things she could not currently use, and returned her full attention to the battle. "Range," Farouk said. "Fire," she said. 30 ships opened up on the consolidated Vreth formation. It was not, in the scale of this battle, a large volley. 30 ships against 4,000. The firepower ratio was not something she let herself compute in real time. What she knew was this. The Vreth had to respond. They were a fleet that responded to threats. It was the discipline that had kept them effective for 300 years. When something fired on them, they turned to address it. They turned. 400 ships swung out of the consolidated formation to engage her fleet. 400 fewer ships on the pale ship. "It's working," Priya said from sensors. "Commander, the fire concentration on the contact is dropping. The pale ship's readings are stabilizing." Not recovering. Stabilizing. There was a difference. The damage was done, but the bleeding had slowed. Keep firing, Yara said. Keep them looking at us. What happened next, she would not have been able to describe in sequence if she tried. Battle at this scale did not move in sequence. It moved the way a storm moves: pressure systems, energy exchanges, local intensities that bore no clean relationship to each other, everything happening at once in a space too large for any one person to see whole. She had the tactical display. She had Farouk's voice and Priya's voice and Dayo's voice, and the voices of 30 captains on the fleet channel. She assembled the picture from those pieces. The San Isidro lost its forward gun batteries in the first exchange, still fighting, still moving. The Hwanghae took a hit that breached 3 decks and managed to seal them and kept firing. The Durban, a destroyer, crew of 60, the smallest ship in her remaining fleet, put itself between a Vreth Lance battery and the damaged Adamant, and took the hit that was meant for her. She felt it through the hull even from inside, the impact transmitted through metal and space. The Durban held together. She added nothing to the file, not yet. They were still here. The pale ship, freed from the full weight of the consolidated formation's fire, moved. It had been relatively still during the sustained barrage, holding position, absorbing damage, returning fire without repositioning. Now it moved, and the movement was the same as always, that quality of belonging rather than pushing, and it drove into the gap between the Vreth formation's flanks, with an intent that Yara could read on the tactical display, the way you read intention in a person's posture. It was not fighting defensively anymore. It was ending things. 9 minutes into the engagement, Dayo called her name. She heard something in it. The thing she had been listening for without letting herself listen for it. Not fear. She knew his fear. But the tone underneath fear. The one that meant the calculation had changed in a way he didn't know how to report neutrally. "Tell me," she said. "The pale ship's structural integrity readings." He paused. "They're dropping again. Even with the reduction in fire concentration, the accumulated damage. Commander, I'm running the models, and they're—" "Tell me the number, Dayo," he told her. She looked at the tactical display. The pale ship was carving through the Vreth formation's left flank, and the Vreth were scrambling to respond, and the battle was turning. She could feel it turning the way you feel a current shift in deep water. Not see it, but feel it. And the pale ship was doing it at cost. At real cost. The readings on her display were not readings that pointed toward a ship that was going to be intact at the end of this. Something very old had come a very long way and was spending itself. Completely. "Can we raise it?" she said. "Any frequency. Try everything again." Dayo tried. Nothing. Still nothing. It was still not answering. It had said 7 words, and those 7 words were all it had to say to them, and it was communicating everything else through the simplest language available. What it did, what it chose, where it pointed itself. She watched it fight. She thought about the debris field and how it had moved. She thought about alloy compositions older than any record in the galactic database. She thought, it knew. Whatever it was, whoever the we was in those 7 words, it had known what it was coming here to do. It had come anyway. It had come with the damage already budgeted, the cost already calculated, and it had not sent a message asking for anything. It had not negotiated. It had not offered an alliance or requested a meeting or established diplomatic contact. It had just come and fought, because some losses, apparently, were not acceptable, even to something that old, even at that cost. "Commander." Farouk, something new in his voice. "Vreth formation, the left flank is breaking." She looked. It was breaking. Not reorganizing, not tactical repositioning. Breaking. Ships peeling off the formation in groups, no longer coordinated. Individual captains making individual decisions. That was what a fleet looked like when the thing it had been built on, the certainty, the unbroken record, the knowledge that it had never lost, cracked. "Right flank?" she said. Holding. Concentrated fire on the contact. But, he paused. "Commander, Kethvor's flagship is moving. He's pushing to the front." She looked at the flagship's marker on the display. It was moving forward, into the fight, not away from it. She thought about the intercept. "I will not be recorded as the one who turned from a ghost." Kethvor was not running. Of course he wasn't. 300 years, 17 civilizations, a record so long and so clean that the identity of his fleet was inseparable from the record. To run was not just to lose the battle. It was to be the moment where the record ended. He would not be that. He had decided he would not be that before the battle was over, and the math was final. She respected it, in a cold, clean way that had nothing to do with sympathy. "Concentrate our fire on the right flank," she said. Give the pale ship room. The pale ship's readings dropped to 30% integrity at 0541 hours. She watched the number and did not look away from it. 30%. She had commanded ships that were pulled from combat at 60%. At 40%, the question was no longer whether you fought, but whether you could hold pressure long enough to get your people out. The pale ship did not appear to be familiar with this particular convention. It was at 30%, and it was accelerating, driving deeper into the Vreth right flank, the last concentrated mass of ships still fighting with any coherence, and the Vreth were pouring fire into it, and the readings dropped to 28 and 25, and her hand found Dio's station again and gripped it. The right flank is breaking, Farouk said, very quietly, the voice of a man watching something he does not have words for. Commander, it's breaking, the whole right flank. She watched. Kethfor's flagship was still there, still firing, a fixed point in the dissolving formation. The pale ship turned toward it. The two of them, the pale ancient vessel and the 300-year flagship of the Vreth Dominion, moved toward each other in the wreckage of what had been a formation, and the space around them was full of fleeing Vreth ships and burning debris, and the sensors on the Adamant were screaming about pale ship structural integrity at 18%, and she heard someone on the bridge say something she chose not to hear. Hold our position, she said. Commander, hold. The pale ship and Kethfor's flagship fired at the same time. The flagship detonated. Clean. Gone. The pale ship did not detonate. It lurched. The word was inadequate, but it was the word. It moved with the first uncontrolled motion she had seen from it. The first thing it had done that was not entirely deliberate. A vast and terrible flinch. The readings on her display dropped through 15% to 12 to 9. It stopped. Drifting. The Vreth formation dissolved around it. Ships running, retreating. Coordinates she could see on the tactical display pointing away from the solar system, away from Earth, away from the pale ship in the center of everything. They ran. All of them. The fleet that had not retreated in 300 years ran, and the pale ship drifted in the debris, and Yara stood at the tactical display and looked at it. At 9% structural integrity. Drifting. Not transmitting. Dio did not say anything. Nobody said anything. She breathed in through her nose. Status on Earth orbital bombardment capacity, she said. Priya's voice, steadier than it had any right to be. All Vreth artillery assets have withdrawn with the fleet, Commander. No active bombardment threat at this time. Civilian shelter networks? Still sealed but intact. Ground comms are coming back online. I'm getting... A pause. I'm getting signals from ground control, Commander. They're asking for status. She looked at the pale ship. 9%. Tell them, she said, and her voice did the small thing it sometimes did, a fraction of something that in another person might have been more. Tell them it's over. The bridge made a sound then. She let it. Deo did not make a sound. He sat very still at his station, looking at the pale ship's marker on his display, and she watched him, and she did not tell him to get it together this time. She let that be too. The celebration started on the fleet channel at 05:53 hours. She heard it come in, voices, overlapping, the sound of people releasing 11 days of something that had no other exit, laughter that was too loud, someone crying openly into an open mic and not caring, Captain Trevino of the San Isidro saying something in Spanish that the translator rendered as approximately, "We are still here, we are still here, we are still here," on a loop, like a person who has just checked that their heart is beating and keeps checking. Yara listened to it. She stood at the tactical display and listened to every voice on that channel, and she did not mute it, and she did not speak into it. She let them have it. All 30 crews, 14,000 people, whatever remained of them after 11 days of the kind of fear that you could not store anywhere. It had to come out eventually, and it came out now, into the channel, into the air, and she stood in the middle of it and let it be. She looked at the pale ship. 9% structural integrity. Drifting. Not transmitting. Protocol said she should not go. Protocol, in the specific language of the fleet's operational guidelines, said that boarding an unknown vessel without full hazmat clearance, crew assessment, atmospheric analysis, and a security escort of no fewer than 6 armed personnel was prohibited for officers of commander rank and above during active or recently concluded hostile engagements. She read the protocol. She went anyway. She told Dio she was going. She did not ask his opinion. He looked at her with their mother's eyes and said, "I'm coming with you." And she said, "No." And he said, "Commander." And she said, "No, Deo." in the voice that was not the commander voice. That was the older sister voice, the one she had not used in 11 days, because the commander voice was what the situation required, and the older sister voice would have broken something she needed to keep intact. He sat back down. She took a shuttle. 1. No escort, just her and the controls and the distance between the Adamant and the pale ship, which took 11 minutes to cross and which she spent looking at the pale ship growing larger in the viewport. It was larger than it had appeared on the tactical display. That was obvious, she supposed. Tactical display markers were symbols, not representations. But the reality of the pale ship's size was something the symbol had not prepared her for. It was not the largest ship she had ever seen in terms of raw measurement. It was the largest in some other sense that she did not have precise language for, a quality of presence. The way a very old mountain is not necessarily the tallest thing around, but is somehow more there than things around it. The hull was pale, as her sensors had suggested. Up close, she could see it was not a uniform color. It was layered, the way old stone is layered. Different shades of pale built up over something she was not able to estimate. The hull was Mark II, not damage, or not only damage, though there was damage too, new and raw against the older surface. Markings that she could not read at shuttle distance. The docking port found her before she found it. She was not, strictly speaking, approaching a docking port. She was approaching a section of hull that her instruments said was structurally viable for contact. The port extended from the hull to meet her. It simply opened, and reached, and her shuttle was guided in with a gentleness that she felt through the controls. Not her doing, not any active input she made, the pale ship guiding her in. Still then, still enough to dock. The airlock cycled. She checked the atmospheric reading. Breathable. The composition slightly different from standard. Higher oxygen, an element her instruments could not name, but breathable. She went in. The interior was dark. Not completely dark. Light came from the walls themselves, a low, sourceless luminescence, like light that had been placed in the material rather than projected into the space. It was enough to see by. It made everything look like the inside of something very old, like a cave that had been tended, like a place that had been inhabited for so long that habitability was now just a property of the material. There were corridors. She walked them. The floor under her boots was a surface she could not identify, not metal, not composite, not anything she recognized, but something that held her weight and did not echo when she walked. Her footsteps were silent in there. She walked in silence down corridors that curved in ways that were not wrong exactly, but were not built for a human standard of right angle and straight line either. She passed rooms. Most were sealed. She did not try the ones that were sealed. There was a protocol for that too, and this time she followed it, partly because she was alone, and sealed rooms in unknown vessels were genuinely dangerous, and partly because she understood, in some way she could not have articulated, that the sealed rooms were sealed for her, not against her. One room was open. She stopped in its doorway. The walls were covered in text. That was the first thing. Writing, or something that performed the function of writing, covering every surface of the room from floor to ceiling, dense and varied, different scripts layering over and alongside each other, without apparent system or hierarchy. She recognized some of them, human scripts. She could see Latin letters, Devanagari, Arabic, Han characters, a dozen others. Most she did not recognize. Shapes that were not built for human hands or human eyes, or human assumptions about how language should sit on a surface, angular and curved and dimensional, in ways that flat text could not be. She walked into the room. She turned slowly, looking at the walls. The writing was not random. She could feel that even without reading most of it. It had the quality of something organized by a principle she was not yet seeing, a logic that was not absent but that she lacked the context to perceive. She stood in the center of it and turned and looked and let it be what it was. On the far wall, at approximately eye level for a person of her height, she noted this without knowing what to do with it. There was a plaque. Not decorative, functional. The material was different from the wall material, slightly darker, set into the surface rather than mounted on it. It was covered in text. She walked to it. The text was in multiple scripts at the top, overlapping, layered, 17 distinct systems she counted, though she could not read most of them. Each, she understood without being told, was the same content rendered in the language of something that had once existed and did not anymore. Below the 17 scripts, one more entry. She could read this one. It was in the standard Galactic Common Script, the neutral commercial script that the Galactic Council used for interspecies documentation. Under it, in a dozen human languages, English, Mandarin, Arabic, Yoruba, Hindi, Portuguese, Russian, and more, the same words. She read them. Each entry was a name, a civilization's name, and beside each name, two pieces of data, a date of first contact with the Vreth Dominion and a date of extinction. 17 entries. She read all of them. She knew some of the names, the Kelthari, the Sorith Communion. Others she had read about in historical files from before the Vreth had reached them. Others she had never encountered. Civilizations so old or so remote that even the galactic record had only fragments. All of them with the same structure: name, first contact, end. At the bottom of the list, the most recent entry. She looked at it for a long time. Humanity, first contact, 11 years prior, no second date. Beside it, and this was where the ink was different, the inscription marginally less settled into the material, recent enough that it still carried a different quality to the eye. 2 words. She read them. She read them again. She stood in that room, in that light that came from nowhere, surrounded by the written names of everything the Vreth had ended, and she read the 2 words that someone had put beside humanity's name. Not yet. The pale ship began to come apart at 0641 hours. She felt it before she saw it, a change in the quality of the floor under her feet, a settling, like a building that is deciding. She did not run. She walked back through the corridors to her shuttle at a pace that was fast but deliberate, and the corridors held, and the docking port released her cleanly, and she backed the shuttle out as the first hull section separated from the pale ship's aft. It did not explode. Of course it did not explode. It came apart the way old things come apart when they are finally finished. Quietly, piece by piece, each piece drifting rather than flying, no violence in it. She kept the shuttle at distance and watched. The pale luminescence faded section by section. The vast pale shape reduced itself, unhurried, over 23 minutes, until what remained was debris. Not wreckage. Debris was wrong. It was not wreckage. It was more like... She searched for the word and could not find it in any language she spoke fluently. More like remains, the word that belonged to something that had completed a thing and released itself after. She watched until it was done. Then she turned the shuttle back toward the Adamant. Deo was waiting at the docking bay. He was not supposed to be there. His station was on the bridge, and she had not authorized him to leave his station. She looked at him standing at the end of the docking corridor, and she decided she was going to let that go, this once, on account of the day they had both just had. He looked at her face. He did whatever it was Dio did when he looked at her face, which was read it the way he had been reading it his whole life, with an accuracy that she had spent 20 years pretending not to find comforting. What was inside? He said. She told him. The corridor was empty, just the 2 of them, the sounds of a ship resuming its normal operations somewhere behind the walls, the distant noise of a crew that was still coming down from something enormous. She told him about the corridors and the room and the walls and the plaque and the 17 names with their dates and what was written beside humanity's entry. She told him all of it in the same even voice she used for everything. When she finished, Dio was quiet for a moment. He had their mother's eyes, and he was 26 years old, and he had spent 11 days cracking jokes that nobody laughed at, and he stood in the corridor and absorbed what she had told him, and then he said, "Someone out there was rooting for us the whole time." She looked at him. "More than rooting," she said. He nodded, slow, the nod of someone letting something settle all the way down to where it needed to settle. "Who were they?" he said. "I don't know." "Are there more of them? Like, is there a whole civilization out there that's been watching?" "I don't know. Will they come back?" She thought about the pale ship, the alloy older than any record, the we in 7 words, the care with which the debris field of human ships had been moved aside, the 2 words beside a name that had no end date. She thought about the cost. "I don't know," she said. He accepted that. He was good at accepting things she couldn't give him answers to. He had always been better at it than she was, which was one of the quiet reversals of older sibling mythology that she had never said out loud. They walked together back toward the bridge. The Adamant was a ship in recovery. She could hear it in the sounds the corridors made, the particular frequency of a crew starting to believe they were going to survive, people talking too fast, laughter at wrong moments, the beautiful, graceless noise of relief. Earth was below them. She could see it from the corridor viewport they passed, the planet turning, the day side clean and blue, the night side still lit in places it shouldn't be, but not more than before. Not worse. The lines of coastline and continent, unchanged by everything that had just happened in the space above them. Still there. She stopped at the viewport. Dio stopped with her. He did not say anything. He had learned that from her, or perhaps they had both learned it from something else. The capacity to stand at a window and just look. Let the looking be enough. The debris field spread across the near-orbital space. Human ships, Vreth ships, and somewhere in it the remains of something that had no name in any database that had been built in the last 40,000 years. She looked at the debris field for a long time. She thought about the room with the names, the 17 scripts at the top of the plaque, each one a language that existed now only on those walls, only in that room that was gone, drifting now in pieces through human orbital space. She thought about whoever had written the names there. Whatever hands, or things that performed the function of hands, had inscribed each civilization as it ended, had kept the record when nothing else would, had decided that the record mattered, even when there was no one left of that civilization to care about it. Kept count. For how long? The question opened in her, and she did not try to close it. Let it be open. Some questions were not meant to be answered. Some questions were meant to be the size they were, so that you understood the size of what you were standing inside. Commander, Farouk's voice on her earpiece. The Galactic Council is requesting communication. They're a pause, a specific kind of pause. They're calling it a remarkable turn of events. Deo made a sound. She looked at him. His face had done something. Noted, she said into her earpiece. Tell them I'll respond when I'm available. She turned back to the viewport. Below her, Earth turned. The same shape it had always been. The same blue. The same coastlines her grandmother had watched on news feeds, and that her grandmother's grandmother had stood on the shore of, and looked out from. Unchanged, turning at the same rate, in the same direction, with the same perfect, unremarkable constancy that planets have when they are not paying attention to the extraordinary things happening in the space above them. Still there. The debris field caught the light as Earth turned, the pieces of it glinting, the pale fragments of something ancient and finished scattered among the human wreckage and the Vreth wreckage, all of it together now, all of it occupying the same space. The ending, and the thing that had refused the ending mixed into each other until you could not say where one stopped and the other began. She looked at it. She did not look away. Somewhere in all of that scatter were the walls of a room, the plaque, 17 names in 17 scripts and 2 words beside the 18th. Not yet, she thought. Someone decided that. Someone, something, with more history than she had access to, more losses than she could count, more time in which to decide that the cost was not worth it. Decided that 2 words were worth the cost. Not yet. She had spent 11 days buying minutes. Someone else had spent something she had no unit for buying 2 words. She breathed in. The window held the planet. The planet held everything else. She turned from the viewport and walked back to her bridge. There was work to do. There was always work to do. She was, after all, the other kind of math.